Many parents will be familiar with this everyday situation. You are in a supermarket with your child. Turn around briefly or reach for something on the shelf, and as soon as you turn back, your child has disappeared. Usually, it's just a moment of panic because the child has only run to the other end of the aisle or to the checkout. But there is one case where this did not happen. Katrice Lee disappeared in 1981 in exactly this everyday situation while shopping in a supermarket. And to this day, her parents are still searching for the girl, who was 2 years old at the time. For 40 years now.
And I was asked a question, how do you maintain hope? My reply is hope maintains me.
November 28, 1981, is Katrice Lee's birthday. She turns 2 years old. The girl was born in West Germany. However, her family comes from Great Britain. Shortly before Katrice's birthday, the Lee family moved to Paderborn. Her father, Richard, is stationed there with the British Army, along with about 80,000 other British soldiers in West Germany. Her mother, Sharon, stays at home full-time and takes care of the children. Katrice has an older sister named Natasha, who is 7 years old. To celebrate Katrice's birthday, her uncle and aunt came to visit this November. The family wants to run a few errands for the afternoon party. Katrice's sister Natasha stays at home with her uncle to prepare everything. The birthday girl Katrice, her parents Richard and Sharon, and her aunt Wendy are on their way to the supermarket. However, the family is not visiting a conventional store, but the British Navy's grocery store. The Nafi shop in Paderborn has been set up specifically for British citizens stationed in Germany. No other shoppers are allowed in. Actually, that's not true, because there are no checks. At 10:30 a.m., Katrice's father Richard drops her mother and aunt off in front of the Nafi shop. It is a Saturday, so the store is quite crowded that morning. There are about 500 visitors in the shop. Since Richard cannot find a parking space, he decides to wait in the car. Katrice, her mother, and her aunt spend about 20 minutes in the store. As the three of them are standing at the checkout, Sharon realizes that she wanted to buy chips for the birthday party. So she drops Katrice off so that the 2-year-old can wait at the checkout with her aunt, while Sharon fetches the chips from the shelf around the corner. When Sharon returns less than a minute later, Wendy is standing alone at the checkout. Katrice wanted to go to her mother and ran after her, but Katrice never made it to Sharon. Wendy is just as confused as her sister Sharon.
And I suddenly remembered that I'd forgotten the crisps for Katrice's birthday party. I ran back up the aisle, came back to the checkout, and I said to my sister, where's Katrice? And she said she followed you. I went all the way around the Nafi and I couldn't find her. We searched the food hall again, the Nafi clothing hall, but that's when I started getting extremely worried. I was panic-stricken, actually.
The women lost sight of Katrice for just a few seconds. Sharon runs through the supermarket calling for her little daughter. The store isn't so big that a child could disappear without a trace. But that's what happened in Katrice's case. She disappeared. And she hasn't reappeared to this day.
I eventually found a carport to park in, and I stood by the side of the car. After a length of time, I realised that something wasn't quite right. I went inside, had no vision of Sharon or Katrice or her sister Wendy, went in search and found them in the manager's office. And that's when my nightmare of 40 years began. Katrice had gone missing.
The positive thing is that the Nafi shop is so crowded and there are many potential helpers and witnesses. When Richard arrives, he learns in the office that Katrice is missing and immediately takes charge of the search. Richard recognizes some members of his unit in the supermarket and tells them that Katrice is gone. So the soldiers join forces to look for the girl. Unfortunately, their search is in vain. It quickly becomes clear that they will not make any progress without the help of the police. The police search the area around the Nafi shop for Katrice. The British military also supports the search with helicopters. Since the girl disappeared on the grounds of the military base, the British military police are leading the investigation. But neither the military police nor the German emergency services can locate Katrice. About 70 meters behind the supermarket, the Lippe River flows by. The river is meticulously searched by divers. It is feared that the girl may have run outside and fallen into the water. However, there is no trace of the 2-year-old girl either on the bank or in the water. The water is even pumped out of the riverbed. In an interview, Katrice's father, Richard, also mentions that she had a real phobia of water. The 2-year-old had resisted even taking a bath at home. It is inconceivable that she would have voluntarily gone anywhere near a river. But it is just as inconceivable how Katrice could have disappeared in a crowded supermarket. After all, there were said to have been around 500 customers in the store that Saturday. There are repeated reports of sightings of the missing Katrice. However, it can never be determined whether the children observed are actually the missing girl. 8 days after Katrice's disappearance, a witness sees a small child who resembles Katrice and is accompanied by an unknown man. Another witness says he saw Katrice in a bicycle seat in a horse pasture. Unfortunately, none of these leads can be substantiated. In 1982, a postman from a town 60 miles away comes forward. He says he saw a little girl on the side of a main road. The child was alone, so he was worried. There was no adult to be seen anywhere. So, the mailman took the child to a nearby police station. However, when the police investigated, it turned out that this was a different child. The child he saw on the main road was safely returned to his parents. Over the years, the Katrice Lee case becomes a cold case. Although the investigation is reopened in both 2000 and 2012, both attempts come to nothing. A few years after Katrice's disappearance, Richard and Sharon Lee separate. They are never able to come to terms with the pain of their missing daughter. In 1993, both returned to the UK independently of each other. During the new investigation in 2000, the ex-girlfriend of one of Richard's army colleagues spoke to the police. She said that her former boyfriend had once told her that he had killed a child. The man is questioned by the police, but denies ever having made such a statement. The informant dies shortly afterwards, so the lead cannot be pursued further. In 2013, a woman named Donna Wright is sentenced to prison. She pretended to be Katrice Lee on Facebook and contacted the family. At first, Donna probably really believed she was Katrice, but a DNA test proved that she was not related to the family. Nevertheless, Donna Wright continued to bombard the Lees with messages. She was sentenced to 3 months in prison and banned from contacting the family. In September 2019, a man was briefly arrested. He was 74 years old at the time and lived in Swindon, UK. Due to lack of evidence, he was quickly released from custody. After his release, the police searched his property. The terrace in front of the man's house was torn up and ground-penetrating radar was used. The evidence that led the police to this man has not been disclosed. Media reports say that the 74-year-old had also served in the British Army. And indeed, Katrice's mother, Sharon, knows the man's name. However, the suspicion against him is apparently not substantiated. Even more than 40 years later, the case remains a great, sad mystery. The police have essentially 3 theories about Katrice's fate. The first is that Katrice could have run out of the Nafi shop and toward the riverbank. There, she may have fallen into the water and drowned. The second theory is that a perpetrator with pedophilic tendencies could have abducted Katrice while she was shopping, abused her, and ultimately murdered her. And the third theory is that someone who cannot have children naturally or who has lost a child could have abducted Katrice to raise her as their own daughter. There are several arguments against the first theory, according to which Katrice drowned. Her father, Richard, mentioned how afraid the girl was of water. In addition, Katrice told her aunt that she wanted to run to her mother, so the child had no reason to leave the store. Furthermore, on that day, the shop was only accessible through the back door. The 2-year-old girl would have had to open a heavy entrance door to leave the shop. In addition, her body and clothes were never washed up on the riverbank. Even meticulous searches by divers were unsuccessful. It is therefore rather unlikely that Katrice really drowned.
But for her to go from the Nafi and get to the river, she would have had to be a steeplechaser because she had to climb hedges and through brambles to get to that river.
Right, okay, so not realistic at all.
Not at all.
So that leaves the 2 kidnapping theories. In any case, the perpetrator must have acted spontaneously. He also took a big risk by kidnapping Katrice in the middle of a supermarket. After all, the girl was only unobserved for a few seconds. In 2018, the military police carried out excavations. The excavation was prompted by an old witness statement. Someone had reported seeing a man carrying a small child to a green car at that location. Such a car is said to have been seen in front of the Nafi shop at the time of Katrice's disappearance. A composite sketch of the man had already been published the previous year. The excavation lasted several weeks and covered more than 200 meters. However, the search was unsuccessful. Richard Lee, in particular, made accusations against the British military police in the years following Katrice's disappearance. He says there were several serious investigative errors. In an interview, Katrice's mother also said that the cashier at the Nafi shop was not questioned until 6 weeks after Katrice's disappearance. By that time, she may have long since forgotten details that could have been important to the case. The military police themselves also admit to mistakes.
The Royal Military Police has acknowledged that the original investigation was flawed.
The golden hours were missed. There is a road into this complex. The road should have been blocked. They should have took names of every person that was inside of this compound.
It took 6 weeks for the girls that were working on the checkout, the day that my daughter disappeared, to be interviewed. And in one case, it took 20 years for one of those members of staff to be interviewed. It took 48 hours for border control points to be informed that my 2-year-old child was missing. And it took 24 hours for sniffer dogs to be brought into the Nafi to try and pick up a scent from Katrice.
Possibly, I could be a grandfather, and I don't know it. So there is no evidence to say anything else.
Richard and Sharon firmly believe that Katrice is still alive and that she may not even know that she was once kidnapped and did not grow up with her real parents. They hope that someone might recognize the faces in the pictures and contact the police. The expert who worked on the pictures describes the Katrice Lee case as one of her most difficult. At just 2 years old, Katrice was extremely young when she disappeared. Even for an experienced artist, it is difficult to develop as accurate an age progression as possible based on her old childhood photos. She used photos of other family members as a reference.
One of the things is just how similar Katrice looks to her mum, particularly in the young toddler photos. We've got an image of Katrice, nearly 2, and a similar photo of her mum. They're remarkably similar, so that was useful to use older photos of her mother to then help assess how Katrice would age. For example, some feedback from the family was useful just to alter and define the jaw shape here and to get the right size of those facial features.
At the time of her disappearance, Katrice was 2 years old, less than 3 feet tall, had dark, curly hair, and prominent dimples. She was wearing a turquoise coat, a white blouse, red rubber boots, and a green and blue plaid skirt. Katrice has poor eyesight and therefore has a fixed gaze. She also has a distinctive birthmark on her lower back. Katrice's sister Natasha was born with the same visual impairment and had to undergo 2 operations during her childhood because of it. If Katrice is still alive, she would probably have needed similar operations. That is why the British Military Police's appeal for information is aimed in particular at doctors who may recognize Katrice's face.
If you believe you may be Katrice or know someone who looks like this and may have had these operations, then I urge you to come forward and contact the investigation team.
Meanwhile, the investigation into the Katrice Lee case has been scaled back. The British Military Police will only pursue new, promising leads. Otherwise, no further action will be taken at this time. However, her parents and her older sister Natasha are still searching for Katrice and have not given up on her even after more than 40 years. I hope this video will help ensure that Katrice Lee is not forgotten. Sometimes cases can still be solved even after years or even decades, and I sincerely hope that this will also happen in the case of Katrice Lee. If you want to give the algorithm for this video a little boost, please leave a like or a comment. As you may know, the video will then be recommended to people who don't know Insolito yet. Especially in a missing person case like this one, increased visibility would be helpful. Thank you in advance. And thank you for watching. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, bye everyone.